Today, we are diving into a family secret so twisted, it actually took a Supreme Court ruling to bring the truth to light. And it's a story that makes you ask a really fundamental question about our justice system. Right, this is the question at the absolute heart of this story. What happens when a final legal decision is actually built on a total foundation of lies? This case really forced the courts to ask themselves if justice can ever truly be set in stone.
Okay, so let's get into it. The story revolves around a mother and daughter, Rosario and Joanne Castro, and a legal document they stumbled upon that just turned their entire world completely upside down.
So this timeline, wow, it gray lays out just how long this deception went on. Rosario and Jose get married way back in '62, have their daughter Joanne in 1970. But then, look at this jump. 30 years later in 2000, Jose secretly files to adopt 2 children. And it takes another 5 years for his wife and his own daughter to find out, which of course kicks off this massive legal battle. So how did they find out? Well, get this. It happened during a totally separate legal issue. Rosario had filed a complaint to have her estranged husband disbarred, basically for failing to support their daughter. And it was buried in the paperwork for that case that this bombshell about the secret adoption was finally revealed. So you have to be asking, how in the world did a respected lawyer, an attorney, pull this off? Well, let's take a look at the official story he spun to the court to get this adoption approved in the first place. So he goes to a court in Batac, Ilocos Norte, and he claims that these 2 kids are his own illegitimate children with his former housekeeper. That was the whole basis for his case. And this just shows you how smoothly it all sailed through. I mean, first, Jose tells the court that he and his wife Rosario are childless, a flat-out lie. Then, a social worker's report just repeats that same lie. So with no one there to say otherwise, the court, of course, approves it. And years later, it was all sealed with certificate of finality, making it supposedly unchangeable. Or so everyone thought. But once Rosario and Joanne actually started digging for themselves, that whole official story that had so easily convinced the court, yeah, it began to crumble. Fast. And their side of the story was absolutely stunning. Rosario argued the whole adoption was just a front, a complete sham, to benefit his driver. She also said that the affidavit of her consent, which the court had on file as Exhibit K, was 100% fake, a forgery. And this right here, this is the smoking gun. Just look at the comparison. On the left, you have the documents Jose gave the court, naming himself as the father. But on the right, you have the official records from the National Statistics Office, which name a completely different man, his driver, as the father. This glaring contradiction became the absolute cornerstone of their case to undo the adoption. Now, with evidence this clear, you'd think, okay, easy case for Rosario and Joanne. But nope, they ran smack into a massive legal wall. And it's this idea of a final judgment. This is a really big deal in our legal system. It basically means that once a court makes a final call, that's it. It can't be changed, not even to fix a mistake. And the whole point is to create stability so that legal battles actually come to an end at some point. And this quote shows you just how seriously the system takes this rule. The Court of Appeals even admitted Jose used a, and I'm quoting here, mind-boggling scheme, but they felt like their hands were tied. The judgment was final, period. So the whole thing came down to this one super critical legal question, because the law does have one tiny exception to that rule of finality, but it only applies to a very specific kind of fraud. Okay, so extrinsic fraud, think of it like this. It's deception that happens completely outside the courtroom. It's a scheme that's designed to keep you from ever even knowing you need to show up and fight for your rights in the first place. Intrinsic fraud, on the other hand, is the stuff that happens inside the courtroom. A witness lying on the stand, for example, or fake documents being presented as evidence. The system basically assumes that this kind of fraud could have and should have been caught during the trial itself. And this slide really makes the difference crystal clear. The Court of Appeals saw the situation as intrinsic fraud, lies and false documents presented in court. But Rosario and Joanne argued no, this was extrinsic fraud because Jose's lies were specifically designed to lock them out of the process altogether, so they never even knew there was a courthouse to go to. And this all leads us to the final act. The case makes its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, which gets the ultimate say on whether this so-called final judgment can actually stand. And boom, a stunning reversal. The highest court in the country sided with Rosario and Joanne,
completely wiping the adoption decree off the books. And their decision was built on two incredibly solid pillars that just dismantled all the previous rulings. So how did they do it? Well, the court's logic was incredibly clear, and it came in two parts. First, they said the original court never even had the legal authority or jurisdiction to rule on the case. And second, they said, yep, this was a textbook case of extrinsic fraud. Let's quickly break down why. The Supreme Court did not mince words here. The law is crystal clear. For an adoption like this, you need written consent from your spouse and any legitimate kids over 10. Because Jose lied and said he didn't have any, Rosario and Joanne were never properly notified. So his lies weren't just perjury in court, they were part of a deliberate strategy to keep his family completely out of court. And that, the court said, is the very definition of extrinsic fraud.
And, this powerful quote from the decision, it really just hits you. It gets to the human cost of all of this. The Supreme Court saw that this wasn't just about legal definitions. This was about the profound injustice done to a daughter who was denied her rights, her identity, and her inheritance by her own father's web of lies. The Castro case is just such a powerful reminder that while our legal system needs finality, it can never come at the expense of the truth. It proves that no judgment, no matter how final it seems, can be allowed to stand when it's built on a foundation of lies that was designed to deny justice itself.